Hello, everyone, on this Wednesday, September 16th. I'm your host, Connor Northup. This is the 10th episode of the Deep Water MMA Podcast. I'm joined by my co-host for the first time in 3 weeks, Lucas Grandsire. Hey, welcome back to the States, Lucas.
Thank you. Feels good to be back. Got to work on my American accent, make sure I say words like yeah and stuff like that. So getting used to it.
And we're also welcoming our guest this week, kind enough to join us, MMA Fighting's own Alex K. Lee. How you doing, Alex?
I'm great. It's great to see you. It's my first time doing a show with Connor. Lucas and I have done shows together before. Lucas, you were looking like a young Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray. You look fantastic.
Actually, now that you say that, I will transition. So I actually went to a Sugar Ray concert a couple of years ago. And one thing I thought was so funny was, I mean, obviously most people were like young and everything. And I remember McGrath said, he goes, they were, I think it was Fly. And he was like, this song, he's like, was like number one hit in America. And all the kids are screaming. And he goes, and none of you were born yet.
It's like 1999 or something like, or 98 or 99. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's something crazy. He's like, none of you were born yet. Everyone just started cheering.
Oh, guys, we're dating ourselves. We're dating ourselves here.
Yeah,
Billie Eilish. Boy, that Billie Eilish is really good.
yeah. But what a weekend this past weekend. We obviously had the two Bellator cards. Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill obviously did their thing in that main event. Very entertaining. Plus, there was a ONE FC card kind of thrown in there too. So a lot to process this week. Was it not, Alex?
Yeah, the two Bellator shows kind of crept up on me. I remember as I was kind of doing preparation at the beginning of the week, I'm like, oh, right. I was like, because I was oddly looking forward to Musasi Davis and, of course, looking forward to the bantamweight title fight. And it only occurred to me, I think, like on Monday or the weekend before, I was like, oh, those are both happening right now. One's a Friday, one's a Saturday. Among a bunch of other notable things, some debuts for Bellator, some fights between high-ranking guys that could lead title shots, and then, of course, going head-to-head with the UFC on Saturday. So it was a super busy weekend. There was a lot of positives to take away from it. I know we're going to talk about on the show, but I'll say I think there's a lot of good stuff for fans of both promotions and MMA in general. So some great highlights and some great lowlights as well. I think we'll also talk about.
Yeah, no, it's been like crazy too, because if you actually think about like when this whole like COVID thing had started, it was like I felt like everything was going like so slow, and now we're having like all these different cards like all the time now and everything. It was like you thought like Contender Series, you're like, oh, that feels like forever away. Then now, like, we're far into that. And then it was like, oh, well, Adesanya and Costa, like, we're only a couple of weeks away from that. So it's like, I mean, at the pace we're going now, it's just moving so fast. And then, Lucas, for you, were you able to catch like a lot of the action this past weekend now that you're on kind of a normal schedule with, when the fights are, they're not like, early in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, when you're in France, you got to pick and choose. Now it's just like, luckily they're on at a sort of reasonable time. But yeah, Bellator, I mean, it was something like, at first thought it was the same fight cards. It's like, wow, Bellator is stacked. And then they bait and switched me by, switching them. And I was like, okay, so they're both kind of medium. But no, it was fun to watch Bellator again, even though I had to stream it because Paramount isn't on everything. But luckily they're done with Paramount. And then, UFC was decent too. So, but there's a lot of MMA. I mean, you even mentioned one championship. I mean, not going to sit there and pretend like I watched that one. But yeah, there's so much going on. It's tough to try and catch everything.
Yeah, and we're seeing like those regional promotions too. Like CFFC already had two cards, and they're having another on Thursday and Friday. So the wheels are definitely moving in the MMA world. And for people that maybe are just watching for the first time, or even if you have been here, I'm just going to explain the kind of the theme of the show. It's MMA reporters, kind of talking to MMA reporters. We'll have a little discussion with Alex, kind of about the crazy world of MMA reporting, and then we'll kind of dive in to some hot topics later on. But Alex, just like looking at what you have done so far and everything too, and I saw you studied sports journalism at Centennial College in Toronto. Was like MMA journalism, was that always the path for you? Were there other sports that maybe like you got into sports journalism to begin with? Was MMA always that route?
I think professionally speaking, actually, surprisingly, yes. I'm not when I was younger growing up. I think like a lot of sports fans, you focus on one of the big four, right? Or again, if you're one of those cultured people like Lucas, I'm sure is football. You study the football, the beautiful game. But a lot of us, again, I'm talking big four North American sports. For me, basketball, I'm still a huge fan to this day. But at some point, you kind of look at the field of how it is to get in there. And I'm not saying it's easy to get into MMA, by the way, but it is, it's a much younger sport relative to NFL, MLB, exactly, all the major sports that we all know so well. So the field is definitely a bit more inviting. I'll say maybe that's the word to use. It's just so young, it's so undefined. as far as what MMA media is. I'm sure a lot of viewers and readers know that. Like you go to one site, it has this kind of tone. You go to another site, it has a completely different tone. And I mean like dramatically different tones. And that's what's cool is like there's kind of always a place for every kind of voice right now. Will it be that way in 50 years? I hope so. You know, I hope that this is kind of how MMA is. Like it's just a kind of sport that invites these kinds of attitudes and things, but maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll become more rigid and more formal. I don't know. You know, there's no way to know. But yeah, for me, I loved MMA, very much a late bloomer, getting into the UFC, and then, you know, from there learning about all the other promotions and going back through history. But yeah, and then just fell right into it, and very, very lucky to sort of the path that came along. Just a lot of just companies that were looking for an MMA guy, and I kept falling into those spots. And then yeah, eventually ending up with MMA fighting, which has been a really, really great experience for the last few years.
Yeah. So Alex, I think you knew this question was coming, but at what point did you realize you wanted to be the Stephen A. Smith of MMA?
How dare you? How dare you, Luke? Well, you know, I'm glad you got it. We're not mentioning that name again. We're not. That's it. That's it.
Just,
yeah,
you have to say it once, like, you know.
That's once. We will also mention Khamzat Chimaev. That doesn't count, but we will bring him up sometime during the show. That's also it's in my contract. Any show I go to, I have to mention Khamzat Chimaev. He equals ratings. So as soon as I mention his name, viewers just start pouring in some. I don't know how they know. It's like a dog whistle. I don't know how it works, but no, I am the nicest person in the MMA media. And by the way, in a field that has many, many nice, wonderful people, I think I am the nicest person. I have a little bit of an edge. If you cross me, Lucas, you've been on the receiving end of it before. But otherwise, I think no, I'm not the SAS. That's as far as I'll go as name of the MMA sports world.
And for you too, Alex, like when you're talking about,
I'm sorry, guys. I think that's on my end. I think.
Yeah, no, like when you were talking about too, like how, you know, it was kind of inviting MMA too. Like, what was kind of like your journey into that? Like, how did you kind of, you know, work your way up to where you are now?
Oh, I'm one of those pro wrestling converts. You know, I had an older brother who hated MMA, hated the UFC. He doesn't like wrestling and like ground and pound, like that kind of thing. I think he got into that sort of unfortunate period where, I don't want to say unfortunate, but like a period where like Tito Ortiz was kind of the champion. So you saw a lot of that. You saw a lot of the Tito style, take a guy down, beat him up, which he didn't find particularly interesting. He's more of a traditional martial artist. He likes Kung Fu and Taekwondo, things like that. So the UFC, wrestling, grappling, not a huge fan of it, but so that kind of, I didn't even try it for a while. I just was like, oh, my brother knows what he's talking about. Then someone said Brock Lesnar came as fighting, and I'm like, I gotta see this bull crap. So I did like a very little bit of research. I'm like, he's fighting Frank Mir. I'm like, he's fighting a former champion. Like, is this a good idea? Like I know Brock Lesnar's tough, and I know about the D1 wrestling background, but anyway, yeah. And then I saw that, and I can't remember who else on that show, but later after that, I think GSP and Anderson Silva, that great boom period, I think, for a lot of people getting into the sport. You know, Chuck Liddell was still in there mixing it up, Rampage Jackson, John Jones coming up. It was such a great time to become a fan. So that's kind of how my opinions are formed. I'm definitely of that newer school, not an old school like Pride guy. Again, I've done my research, but I wasn't in the moment. So yeah, I'm a mid-aughts convert, as it were, pro wrestling style.
Yeah, no, that was definitely like unique time too. Because I think I started getting around. It was around that like 2009, like 2010 range too, where I saw guys like Chuck Liddell too. I mean, I think he was starting. He was kind of outside that prime too. Like I think of like Rich Franklin, Couture. All those guys were kind of, I guess, you know, kind of 1 foot out the door at the time. But yeah, I mean, that was a crazy time. Dude, like Nogueira was Big Nog. Obviously, Little Nog just retired too. But yeah, that was an interesting time for sure. And
you learn so much when you get into a sport for the first time. I'm also a late bloomer when it comes to basketball. Like I said, I'm a hardcore basketball fan, but like I think I was as a kid, I watched like Michael Jordan. That's about it. And then as I got older, and Toronto kind of got a more established team, and I was like, oh, it was perfect time for me to come in. And then you learn all this stuff right away, and you have stupid opinions early on that hopefully you get rid of. Some of them never change. I used to think Chris Lieben was like the greatest fighter I'd ever seen in my life. I thought Chris Lieben was brilliant. I think his fight with Sakara was one of the first fights I'd seen. It's one of those classic Lieben things where he just got punched a million times and just walked right through it. I'm like, this guy will never lose. I'm like, this guy's amazing. Look at him. He's invincible. I learned very quickly Chris Lieben was not invincible, and a lot of other things, thankfully, that have allowed me to work in this field.
And for you too, just like being in the Canada area too, like were you, how familiar were you with, like, especially like when you're getting started too, were you familiar with like the regional scene there?
No, not at all. And if anything, it was kind of like that was the bad thing. Was I thought it was so cool with GSP and TK over in Montreal, and so I thought the scene was booming, and I think it was for like a minute. And then when the Ontario, when they passed, like, they're going to allow MMA, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is the second wave of Canadian MMA is going to come along. And like the exact opposite happened. There's too much regulation, too much red tape. I'm just not sure what happened to MMA in Ontario, but it's a very dead scene outside of the amateur circuit. So in that sense, I came in at the wrong time, and I'm a little sad about that. I would have loved to have been able to cover more local events, but really there just aren't any.
Yeah. And did you start too, like as more as like a radio guy, like kind of doing like stuff like this, or were you more like kind of print?
Oh, blogger. My start was with doing stuff on Bloody Elbow. They have a very lively fan post section. I'm not sure how much it is now. I know at the time when I started doing it, I'm like, yeah, it was very accessible. People seemed to read it if you wrote something that was compelling, which was good. It's very merit based. And I was just doing Ultimate Fighter recaps. I just love the Ultimate Fighter. I noticed sites stopped doing it, and then when I started doing the recaps myself, I realized why. Because the seasons were getting pretty bad. But for me, it was so fresh just to write about it. So I was able to, come up with something at least moderately interesting. And you get like 6 comments on there, and every time you got like six comments from me, was like, oh, this is amazing. This is the greatest feeling in the world. That 6 comments might equal like 12 people who actually read it, and then half of them comments. I don't know, but started with writing, and kind of wanted to get into video, get into broadcasting. But again, that's a little bit more difficult to get into. Again, but I love doing stuff like this, and so I like having the option of doing podcasts and videos, but also but primarily writing, and I'm fine with that. I enjoy writing as well.
Yeah. What's been that like too? Like you say, you like doing stuff like this, and obviously you're doing more of that now too. Like, what has that been like, kind of adjusting to that throughout the years?
Well, I've always liked to talk, but I think like a lot of fans, it's one thing to know that you can talk about a sport, and another thing to be able to do it professionally. I think that's something like really everybody learns. I would point to like Dominic Cruz, for example. I think Dominic Cruz is a genius as an analyst. And I think people who will watch him, his first couple of shows, I think people loved him right away. I remember I was very critical. I'm pretty critical of commentators and broadcasters. But I know a lot of people liked him right away. But if you watched his like first few shows to now, he's so much better. He still has a lot of improving to do, and I'm sure he'll admit that as well. But he's so much better because it's just a different thing to talk about a sport with like friends, in a private setting, and then actually do it in something like this, having conversations and covering topics and knowing how to be succinct, which I'm not being right now. But again. It's certainly a work in progress. So I still love doing this stuff, and just always learning. It's tricky. It's definitely, you have to be careful what you say, and also just not be embarrassed when you say something stupid, because it's going to happen.
So here's something I'm curious about. You mentioned going to school for sports journalism and stuff. Your former colleague Luke Thomas always has very big comments, right? Going to sports journalism for doing MMA media. Did you feel like it was helpful going to school for that, or did you feel like what was kind of that impact?
Oh, for me, 100%. 100%. It was like a very short program, but very hands-on. Classic, it's a very cliche, I think, for people who go back to school. You get out of it what you put into it, right? And it was very true in this case. So I needed it. There was a lot of things which I thought I understood in theory, but then once put into practice, I realized how little I knew. And again, still to this day, like I said, there's things I'll approach and I think I know how to do it, and then you try and you're like, holy crap, I need to talk to people. I need to ask questions. It was hugely beneficial. I would recommend to anyone who's kind of wanting to get into this field, please try some form of journalism, sports journalism. If you have a program that you can go to that works for you, great. But of course, just journalism in general is really helpful. I'm not saying you can't get into it just by doing like blogging and self-training. There's certainly people in the world gifted enough to do that. I am not one of them. And if you're not one of them either, I would say give school a shot if you can afford it and if you have the time for it, because it was absolutely invaluable.
I wanted to ask about that too, because I went to journalism school at Temple, but just like when you were like looking at schools too, like were a lot of schools like offer that sports journalism program? Because I think Penn State has that, but I don't remember like a lot of other schools kind of offering that, hyper kind of sports journalism class.
In Toronto, surprisingly, there's actually a few good ones too. There was 3, and I think I went to one of the smaller schools, but we have one I think at Ryerson. I think they have a dedicated sports journalism program as well, and there's another one closer to downtown Toronto. I was more on the outskirts. I wasn't quite in downtown Toronto. So it's in the Greater Toronto. It actually is quite a thing to go to sports journalism. So we do have a lot of journalists come out of Toronto. So I mean, it's not a coincidence. A lot of talent comes out of Toronto that ends up working for, again, huge outlets like ESPN, TNT, stuff like that. So yeah, it's not a coincidence. Big focus on in this area, and the talent comes that shows. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there any like MMA like kind of enthusiasts, like as far as like professors and like other students too? Because I remember like when I was going to school too, there was like nobody. Like you said, it was like kind of like those top 4 sports that everyone was kind of going after.
No, my professor hated MMA. He's an old school, I think, boxing guy, though even that he doesn't love, and he loves pro wrestling. So on that, at least we kind of bonded. So I tried to convince him to let me do MMA projects. Not that he didn't know what MMA was. He knows what it is. He just did not like it. So that was fine. But again, he didn't stop me from pursuing MMA. He just didn't have a lot of notes for me when I came to him with MMA related questions. Let's put it that way. But the person who really, the first job I went to at the Score, they were looking for people for NBA, NFL, and baseball, I think. And then just offhandedly, I mentioned, I would say my second sport that I'm most knowledgeable about would be MMA. And then that suddenly moved me to the top of this hiring list because he's like, oh, great, we're looking for an MMA person. So that's my other thing I would tell people is, guys, mention all your skills. Don't be shy. Mention your skills. Don't be embarrassed by anything. If you love cricket or something and it doesn't come, mention it. Throw it in there. Maybe they need a cricket person, rugby. You just never know where that opportunity is going to come along. Because again, for me, I thought maybe I'd have a shot at covering basketball, and maybe I will someday. But right now, the MMA thing came up, and it's just fit perfectly. So I love covering MMA, and I love, like I said, Kenny will do stuff like this.
Yeah. Are you a fan of cricket, Lucas? Or
a huge fan. Number one cricket guy right here, Ismail Malamedov, a favorite player of cricket. Everything's off top of the dome, just making shit up.
What a pull! What a pull!
For people, I
was expecting that.
I mean, if you're confident about it, people will be like, "Man, Ismail, this is a great player. Got lots of home runs or touchdowns or whatever those people do." No, cricket's not in the real wheelhouse. It's basketball, the beautiful game, and of course, MMA. So there we go.
For sure. There was I think a Netflix documentary that was about cricket. I actually want to watch it because I heard a lot of good things. I don't know if you guys saw that or not.
It's cricket. Why would you want to watch that?
Well, Lucas, what are they
talk about? We watch face punching. We get paid to cover face punching. You guys want to watch stuff about cricket? Oh no, disappointed, guys. I have to. But please go on. So, riveting documentary on cricket and the hardships of running back and forth with a weird flat bat.
I remember we actually they used to have us play that in gym class. I remember. I always thought that was really interesting. I was like, can we just play baseball at this point?
Just a merc.
But I guess moving on to, I guess we'll go on to the debate portion of the show, and like I kind of mentioned at the top, a lot to process from this past weekend, and I thought one thing that really stood out, and it kind of took place right before everything kind of happened on Friday afternoon. Bellator obviously announced the deal with CBS Sports, and that they're going to be moving away from Paramount Network. I believe it starts on October 1st. But for you guys too, and we'll start with Alex on this one, but just how significant do you think that deal is for that promotion?
Those were the last Paramount shows, right? Paramount and DAZN shows, I guess.
Yeah, because the October 1st they're going to start, and I think that the October 1st. I think that's the Milan.
Yes. End of an era, guys. No more endless bar rescue commercials, ink wars. They had that. I mean, obviously, before all this stuff happened, of course, with the recent social unrest, they had one of the best lead-ins with Cops, and I think they had Cops after, which I think was big for ratings.
Yeah.
You can't have a better lead-in than Cops, and you can't lead into a better show than Cops. 100%. So, unfortunately, that is all over now. I think from a branding perspective, obviously it's much better. I think there's so many people who didn't even know for the longest time, why was it on Paramount Network? Maybe they didn't know it used to be Spike TV. It just doesn't sound like something that would show sports. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think Bellator was their last live sports program they even had on there. So it was very much alone in the Paramount Network family. And while in some ways that can be beneficial, I think in this case it hurt it. I think it made it look a little second rate. If that's to use a strong term, I think it made it look a little second rate to put on, like I said, in between episodes of Cops, and now here's a rerun of Top Gun, and fine programming to be certain, but not something that I would put together with my MMA programming. So it is a big deal in that sense. I know CBS Sports is in less households, which is notable. So I think we're really going to see the real test. I think will be not the first few October the first few October shows. The ones in the second half, though. Cyborg. I think Cyborg's coming back on the 15th, and then the 29th. I think is the Lima and Gegard Mousasi fight. Yeah. So those are the two fights that we'll see. I don't want to say necessarily like a boost in ratings because they're on CBS Sports, but can they at least kind of hit the same upper level that they were able to on Paramount Network? Because I think some of the shows there at the end of Paramount Network, those ratings were getting rough. Yeah. Those ratings reports were pretty low, except Michael Chandler. I think there was a spike with Michael Chandler, which again shows you kind of his drawing power and why everyone's still talking about him right now and so interested in his free agency. But for Bellator, the 15th and the 29th is when we're really going to know, is the CBS Sports move a good thing? It's certainly not a bad thing. It's just, sorry, how good, I should say, how good is the move for them? So, yeah, and we get CBS Sports up here in Canada, I think. So no huge change for us. I don't think.
Yeah. It sounds like there might be I was reading right before I came on here that it sounds like there might be a little movement with the whole Chandler thing as well. But Lucas, what's your kind of take on the whole CBS deal?
Well, I think Alex hit the nail on the head a little bit with Paramount. It did kind of feel like it was the leftover from Spike TV, right? Like Paramount showed up, and I guess they were going to show us old cowboy movies as a part of Cops and all that stuff. And then it's like, oh, and by the way, we still have Bellator. And it's like, what? Okay. So it didn't feel like they were up to their potential. The thing that makes me laugh about the deal is that it always feels like Bellator is so many steps behind the UFC. Like whatever the UFC does, they have to do a crappier version of it. Case in point, UFC moves to ESPN. They got to go to ESPN, CBS Sports. Ariel Helwani moves to ESPN. Who do we find out just moved to CBS? Luke Thomas. It feels like they try to combat what the UFC does by doing their own version of that, but it's interesting. I feel like what I like better is that it's CBS Sports. So they actually know what they're doing with sports. I think they might do stuff with boxing or something like that. So I certainly trust CBS more than I do Paramount, because old cowboy movies and Phil Davis, like it doesn't really, go together. So I'm interested to see what CBS does, but the fact that they brought in more Brian Campbell, Luke Thomas, it shows that they're serious about it as well. So I'm very curious. I think it could be a great deal. Anything to make it look better, especially presentation wise, and look more professional. So I'm definitely interested to see what CBS are going to do with this.
Yeah, and you even saw like Coker, like you were joking about like the westerns and stuff too. He even said, he was like, "Oh, he's like, I still love the show Yellowstone." Like he had to put that in there, but yeah, I just think like kind of going off what you guys said too. I think just one of the biggest things that kind of stood out when they made the announcement was the whole like time delay thing, especially with the international events too. That's big because I mean, if you look at Bellator too, that's been like as far as like the fans that watch. Bellator and the UFC, that was one of the big complaints. It was just like, they don't, it's like, it's just weird to watch it like with that. And I think this opens obviously, like I think Alex said, just, kind of more opportunity, more chance for, I guess just like having that time being more accessible, I think to the fans is big too. Like maybe it won't be as many homes, but I think still it is kind of accessible more than it was before.
Yes, streamlining is so important. It is amazing how every time there was an international Bellator card, there's just questions. How do I watch this?
Yeah,
I think you guys, putting together posts for like results posts or whatever post that you would put the schedule of the show on. I'm sure you guys had internal conversations of like, do you know? Wait, is this part's on? Okay, wait. So this part of the prelims is on this, and then this part of the prelims is on this. But then the main card is airing before the prelims of this show. It's actually two Bellator shows combined, and it just made no sense. And I was just like. Every time I would look at those things, I'm like, imagine having this, even if I were having this conversation in person with someone, how would I explain this? Like, right? Like writing it down is confusing enough. And they're like, oh, maybe, but maybe if someone just asked me, I'm like, no, that's not helping. I don't know how I explain this to someone, how this Bellator show that just, it's actually two separate shows happening on the same day. There's a main cards happening. So whatever streamlining they can do, again, I'm sure there'll be some hiccups. Again, anytime you do international shows, I'm sure, this stuff's going to come up, but anytime you can make it easier for people just to watch your programming, that's really big. That's really big. And like you said, no more of this time delay, man. The time delay thing became such a point of contention, I think, for a lot of people who want to like take shots at Bellator, and it's legitimate, right? It's in today's day and age. How can anything be on tape delay? Right? I'm sure there's reasons for it, but again, for a fan, they don't care about the reasons. They just want it. They just want it, and they want it now.
Yeah. And one of those international shows too, I think that announcement came on Thursday, but they're obviously having that the France card. I think that's Bellator 248. It's Shi Kongo versus Timothy Johnson, the rematch. But Lucas, I'll start with you on this one, just because I know you were recently kind of in France and you saw what's like during the whole quarantine thing. Like, how do you kind of feel about them allowing fans? I think they said like about 5,000 fans. I think it's 25% of whatever the arena holds are allowed to have.
Well, I think what people don't realize is that we're not doing social distancing. That's just how many fans actually want to attend the show in France. But it just happens that it looks like. Listen, obviously, I was in France pretty much during the whole pandemic, except for recently. And if there's one country that I trust, that if they say we can allow some fans, France would be that country that I trust. I mean, listen, they kept us quarantined. If you left the house, you needed a signed paper. Listen, I'm going to, the French Walmart or whatever. I'm exercising. And if you didn't have that paper, you could get arrested and, cops, all that stuff. So they took it very seriously, which means that for me, if they're allowing people to go to the show, they have plans in place. I don't think you're going to be wearing a mask the whole time, but I assume they're going to socially distance everyone. And if France said it was okay, then I'm sure they have the right measures in place. Because when I was there, everything was taken very seriously, even going to restaurants, stuff like that. Things were definitely better than America, where I see the people here, it's like they barely cover their mouths and, we're infringing on our rights. But in France, people are pretty good about respecting the measures, buying way too much hand sanitizer. So I'm sure the government has something in place that's going to keep these guys safe. It does seem a little bit risky, but I think soccer, they already started bringing back the fans as well. So I'm sure they're going to do things correctly. I'm not too worried about it, but it does look a little bit weird, especially where in America, the situation is very different from how it is currently in France.
What did you kind of make of the whole thing, Alex?
Them having fans?
Yes.
Again, like I said, I'll definitely defer to Lucas here. Like, Japan was kind of doing it before. I think a few months ago they had a show in Saitama or Yokohama. I'm sorry, a kickboxing show. I think it was a K1 show, and this was in end of April. Like, this was so soon after the outbreak really started, and all these companies were shutting down. This Japan, this K1 show, I think, had fans, and they kind of did stuff that people are doing now. So again, I think they did it too early. But I understand that they at least did their best. There was some temperature checks. There was, a certain amount of seats, people are seated here, designated seating. So, I think they took a lot of criticism for it. But like Lucas says, like maybe these organizations know what they're doing. Maybe these governing bodies know what they're doing. I'm still against it, but I'm a fairly paranoid person. I'm a better safe than sorry person. And I understand, again, if people have the proper safety protocol in place, that they feel like the show must go on and let's give it a shot, and someone has to be the first one through the door. So if this is how it goes down in France and it goes down safely, I mean, that's a big step for them, and also again for Bellator to have pulled this off. For sure.
And we talked a lot about Bellator now, but we also had the UFC this past weekend, and obviously Bellator had the advantage of having those two cards. But I mean, even though a lot of people kind of were, maybe the UFC card wasn't the most highly touted going in, I mean, I think it is served pretty well, and especially with the Waterston and Hill too. I mean, that was a great fight, all the way through. So for you guys, and we'll start with Alex on this one too. What promotion do you think kind of won the weekend?
Was it an advantage having two cards, Connor? Was it? Because based on the reception I've seen to 245, I watched the highlights 245 and some of the fights in replay, but I did not catch it live. But I was paying attention to social media at the time. And I saw a lot of people not thrilled with the main event, not super thrilled with Kat Zingano's debut, and depending who you ask, thrilled or not thrilled with some of the techniques that struck below the equator. Now, I'm a sadistic person, and I find humor in fouls in MMA sometimes. I think we all do, right? We all enjoy a good low blow every now and then. But I will say, even I felt sympathy for poor Peter Stonanek, who I'm sure everyone's seen the clip by now. Raymond Daniels striking, I think it was twice, with spinning kicks to the groin. Spinning kicks to the groin. We're not talking a glancing like teep that accidentally, was a misplaced teep. No. These were spinning kicks. I think that Raymond Daniels later described as a grenade launcher or dynamite. Just not. He described it in a way that you would not want to be hit by that kind of strike.
Yes.
Where it hit. So that card certainly didn't do Bellator favors. But I thought from what I saw on Saturday, it was definitely much better. I thought the main event was very, very strong. I thought they got some very positive things that they can build on, like Neiman Gracie. That's a nice win. That's a nice bounce back win. Oh, sorry guys, am I frozen?
You kind of look like a robot right now. Did we lose him? I think we might have lost him. Oh, there he is.
Making a comeback.
Alex, can you hear us? We can't hear him. Well, maybe Alex is working on that. Lucas, for you, what promotion kind of won the weekend?
Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry, my bad.
Oh, there he is. All right, he's back. Yep.
Hello. Sorry about that. Sorry, Lucas, were you in the middle of a thought? Sorry, I'm having some internet connections here. Sorry, Lucas, were you in the middle of a thought? I don't want to interrupt you if you were taking over.
No, don't try to out-Canadian me. Like, I gave you your space. Your bag. Go
yeah,
ahead.
Sorry. I was saying yes, even though the main event and some of the action on 245 may have been disappointing, I think there was a lot of positives from 246. A very good main event. A strong champion. I like Juan Archuleta. I know he's not, maybe not the most well-known guy now, but you can work with him as your champion. Very talented guy. Neiman Gracie, huge comeback from the Rory McDonald loss, which I think had a lot of people questioning, was he, like any Bellator guy when they take their first loss, was he just defeating easier competition? John Fitch, very legitimate. Yes, maybe near the end of his career. or at the very end of his career, as we found out after. But very tough guy to submit. So that was great for Gracie. And then starting debuts, I think, for Liz Carmouche. And, Keone Diggs with the big upset. But that's good. I mean, Derek Campos is an established name. He's the kind of guy you keep around for exciting fights. And hey, maybe to, as we say in pro wrestling parlance, put over a younger talent. I'm not saying he meant to, but I think a lot to build on. But I'll give the edge to the UFC. I thought the card surpassed expectations. I know there's a lot of people that were down on it. I was a big fan of the main event. And I think, again, top to bottom, you had both entertaining fights. I think there's 2 or 3 fights that could have won fight of the night. And again, you had people also step up. Kevin Kroom, great story. There was a lot of good stories. So I'll give the edge to the UFC. I think they had the better card, taking everything into account.
How about you, Lucas?
Well, I think it's tough because, like I said off the top, if Bellator could have combined and created just like one gigantic card title fight, the co-main event, like it could have been a really good card, and I think it would have surpassed the UFC. But instead, we got Friday, a card that looked fun on paper and was not fun at all, especially for with Raymond Daniels. I forgot what his opponent's name was, but anytime you hear a grown man screaming like that, especially someone who gets punched in the face for a living, like my nuts hurt watching that. And I'm not trying to be all up in there, but no, it was awful hearing that. I mean, listen, we had some names. The Kat Zingano fight, like, listen, I was fine with it because she needed to do what she needed to do to win, to bounce back, the big promotion. But I mean, on paper, it really didn't deliver that much. The main event wasn't great. Like, I feel like if we could have had one combined card, they would have beat the UFC. But like Alex mentioned, just going on Twitter, you can see like where the hype is. And I feel like more people were excited for the UFC. More people were talking about the main event there than they were anywhere else. Even though Bellator went after the UFC, which was good because they didn't have to compete for it. But you have to give the edge to the UFC, even though I feel like Bellator could have and possibly should have won that night with the kind of fights they put on. But, I think it's a missed opportunity giving us 2 mediocre cards instead of like one really good card to sort of, rival everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just to kind of like piggyback off of that too. I think especially in the circumstances of like going into this card, a lot of people weren't like that excited about this UFC card. There was a lot of talk about this main event too. Like people didn't think that should be like a main event. So you think like with Bellator 2, that could have been maybe something could have capitalized on more too. But one thing I do want to talk about 245 too is everyone's talking about the Stanonik, but actually in the prelims there was a heavyweight fight where there was also a similar. I mean, it wasn't a spinning back kick, but I mean the guy's groans. Like I remember when Stanonik first got hit, I was like, oh my god, it's like deja vu. It sounds just like the other guy did. And that guy I don't think got a stretcher out, but he was having a hard time walking, at least. But one thing that kind of stood out to me too about that card, I was covering it for Miami News, so I guess I was watching maybe a little closer than some of the casual people. But I just thought that with 246 too, I thought that was a better card. But Taylor Johnson, Alex Polizzi, I thought those were 2 guys that Bellator. I thought those were great though because Polizzi got that win over Cavallo, so I think that's a guy that you could. Push too. And Johnson got a very impressive win over Ruth too. So I thought there was definitely room to build there as well.
What is up with Carvalho? What happened there?
He was just like dominated. Like, I mean, Polizzi just looked, I thought the better all around. Yeah. He just looked like he didn't want to be there, honestly.
That's not saying, I just mean in general. Four of his last 5 losses in 4 of his last 5. He's not that old. He's 34. He's 21 fights. That's a decent amount of mileage, but that's not extraordinary by MMA means. I don't know. Maybe I got to track this guy down for an interview because he's really kind of fallen off a little bit. I mean, I guess Musasi, Machida, Nemkov. There's no shame in losing to those guys, but then you lose to an up-and-comer like Polizzi. Again, no shame, but 4 out of 5 for a former Bellator champion. Yikes.
Yeah. I think especially that too, because when you talk about those other losses you're like, all right, like, you can kind of see that. But even like a guy like Polizzi too, it's just like, even though he's undefeated, you still look at those fights and you're like, wow, that's such like a big like experience jump too, though. Mm-hmm. Like you didn't expect him to be that dominant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Again, sometimes you just hit that wall. Who knows? Maybe it is just the run of a Polizzi's face. Maybe you said he didn't look like he didn't want to be there. Maybe he took Polizzi lightly. Let's hope that's not the case. That's like the worst thing any fighter can do. So I don't know. Hopefully good things are ahead for Rafael Carvalho, but that is a tough stretch he's in right now. Yeah.
But I think we're kind of leaning towards the UFC as far as being the winner this weekend. So let's kind of jump into that main event, which, I mean, it turned out great, obviously, but I think the big story here is with, the loser of this fight, Angela Hill. That's her 2nd straight loss. And obviously you could argue both. I mean, I think the Gadea loss probably more than this one. But for you guys too, I guess we'll start with Alex again. What did Angela Hill's second straight loss kind of mean for her?
I don't think it's too terrible. I don't think it sets her back very far. For one thing, this is the most publicity she's had going into a fight. She had a nice little ESPN featurette. She was a star during media day. She's always good during media day, but she was given plenty of time to operate and to talk. So in that sense, it was good for her. And she handled it all really well. I think for someone who, yes, she's very, out there on social media. She seems very upfront. She does strike me as someone who's a little bit socially awkward, but has learned to talk to people and to speak to us and deal with us in the media as her profession has forced her to do. So I think she's become one of the best interviewers, if anything. And she showed that this week. So she had her time in the spotlight. Michelle Waterson's kind of been in this role before. I think this was her third UFC main event. We know she's good with the media, so that wasn't surprising. But I think Angela Hill really, really stepped up and stepped up in the fight as well. It was a great fight. I actually did score for Waterson. I had one of the more controversial cards. I actually agreed with Sal D'Amato, which did not go over well with the people I mentioned that to. So I probably should have pretended I didn't say it on the show, but it's out there on Twitter, so I own it. And when I say I think Michelle Waterson won more rounds, I mean those rounds were super close. 48-47 either way. Even for me, like I said, 49-46. But you could take two of those rounds, and really, I don't want to say it's almost kind of a coin toss. It was such a great competitive fight. So in that sense, I really don't. And the fact that so many people thought Angela Hill won, there's certainly enough of an uproar that it almost makes it almost helps her. Now she's had hard luck twice in a row. I think she's developing that reputation as someone who fights so hard, and for some reason it's just not getting that nod from the judges. And I think fans get behind someone like that. They get behind winners too, but they get behind hard luck losers too. So I hate to use the word loser for Angela Hill because I think she was a big winner on Saturday regardless. And I don't think we see her drop too far in the rankings. And knowing her again, she'll probably be fighting 2 weeks from now. So not sure she's affected that much by the loss.
Yeah. Well, that's what's like the circumstance I think is like so kind of like weird too and like unique too, because like you think about someone who you're like, oh, well, they had 2 straight losses. You'd be like, wow, their stock must have really dropped. It doesn't really feel like Angela Hill's stock really dropped that much, especially like you said too. I think she's kind of getting some sympathy from the fans too, because they feel for her that, they thought she should have won those fights too. So, I mean, it almost seems like she's kind of maybe even gaining something in a sense. But for you, Lucas, where do you kind of stand on it?
I mean, it's 2 split decisions, so it's not like she got gadooshed 2 fights in a row. She does a great job of marketing herself as well, as we've seen on social media. For people like Alex, who I guess have been lucky enough to interview her, they've seen that first things up close. But she does a great job of keeping her name out there, and it seems like the fans haven't turned on her. It's like it makes me think like someone like Israel Adesanya, who, was doing a great job of marketing himself, and then out of nowhere, everybody hated him. It seems like everybody likes Angela Hill, so she's going to be one of those names that, people are going to like her, and even if she loses a close fight, since people like her, they'll probably tend to lean towards her. I'm not saying people in the media because obviously we're in a different position, but she's going to do a good job of keeping her name out there. In terms of what it does, I mean, it's 2 fights in a row where there's a lot of people that scored it for her. She's going around telling everyone that she won those fights, and some people are believing her in this case. So it's not 2 fights that are damaging. She's won rounds. It's not like she lost 50-45 and 30-27. So it's not going to do a whole lot. I think if anything, it showed us that she's ready. I mean, Gedalia, you can say what you want about her declining or not, but she's a tough out. Same thing with Michelle Waterson. I think it showed she belongs to the top of the division. And if anything, it should be exciting because she's hanging in with these people. Some people thought she won. So for me, it's not going to be damaging for her at all. And we're seeing her take a ton of fights. So before you know it, she's going to be on a winning streak. We're going to forget about it. So I'm excited to see her future. I mean, she still has a bright future at this point.
Yeah, and I think just importantly, the company likes her. You mentioned like the media likes her, the fans like her, the company likes her. That's really what matters the most, right? Forget about us. We know they like Michelle Waterson. She's a company woman through and through. And I think Angela Hill is in that way as well. I mean, maybe not as far as, they kind of butted heads over. I think Angela Hill thinks Michelle Waterson's a bit of a brown noser, something to that effect. But I think they're both well liked by the company in different ways. If anything, just because Angela Hill keeps agreeing to take fights, and that is the one thing they asked for. And the other thing I'll say is I think Angela Hill did a great job having to speak on the narrative of, again, the social unrest going on in North America, the Black Lives Matter movement, because I don't think she volunteered herself for that. I don't think she didn't shy away from it, certainly, but it's not her responsibility to speak for all Black athletes or all Black women in that position, but she was asked about it. I think she did a great job speaking about it. People can like her answers or not. People can like her attitude towards it or not. That's fine. But I think she handled it as best she could. And I think that's another feather in her cap coming out of this weekend that shows she could tackle a really difficult, controversial subject heading into a very, very big fight for her and still perform well. And it's just unfortunate she didn't get the nod, but otherwise, I guess came out on top in so many ways.
Yeah, it feels like there's so many like storylines like around Hill too, because not even all that, but I mean she's also one of the more active fighters too, so that's always something that people can obviously jump onto as well. And like I have to think too that she's already kind of pushing for that Gidea fight. I know Gidea's got a fight in November, but that's one that I think eventually they're going to have to probably run back there.
Yeah, I think she can get the winner or loser of that fight. It's either Gadelia, and I think she's fighting Yan Xiaonan, I think.
Yes.
Right? Yeah,
yep.
I think I would have no problem with Hill either getting the winner of that fight or the loser. I think it makes sense. Again, she's in that spot. The other things I thought for her were maybe she fights another veteran, maybe like a Felice Herrig. Oh, sorry, well, not Felice Herrig. Now I know Felice Herrig is dealing with some injuries. Sorry, I was going to say a rematch with Tisha Torres. That could happen.
Okay.
I think she fought Tisha in her first or second actual UFC fight. I don't remember. And then that was quite a long time ago. I can see that happening. And then wherever Karolina Kovacevic is, that fight is a possibility as well. Another fighter who's kind of on a losing streak, a little more definitive than Angela Hills, but someone who again would make for a good fight. And again, two people with experience you can put in a co-main event or whatever situation you want to put them in. So yeah, she doesn't fall far. I hope they don't relegate her to the status of gatekeeper, but considering how frequently she wants to fight, I don't think she cares.
Yeah. And then, I mean, that's it for the topics this week. And but before we kind of close it here, Alex, anything you'd like to add, and also anything that maybe you're looking forward to this upcoming weekend?
Oh, sorry, can you repeat that? I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone for my connection. It keeps conking in. Sorry, can you repeat that?
No, yeah, I was just, but before we kind of get going here, for you, anything you're kind of looking forward to as far as, fights this weekend, any particulars? Did we lose him again?
Man, again, I think that's like everybody else. It might be a little past its best before date. Oh, hold on. Hello.
Yeah, we got it.
Guys, we're gonna finish strong. We're gonna get through this.
You got it, Alex. We're with you.
Can you hear
Ask
us?
Lucas first.
All right. Lucas, what are you looking forward to this upcoming weekend? Anything?
You go to Lucas first.
Obviously, that main event, Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley. I think I'm taking Alex's point a little bit. The question is, how much does Woodley have in the tank? But listen, it's still a fun grudge match. It wasn't marketed well at all, if you can call it being marketed, but it's still a fun fight. I saw a bunch of people talking about the card, like, this could be a pay-per-view or something like that. So no, it's a stacked card. I think I might even have a friend come over and watch it. And it's not a pay-per-view. So that tells you, how good the card is. So very excited for the main event. I'm afraid we're all going to get our hearts broken because it's going to be a replay of the Lawler Covington fight, except we replaced Lawler with Woodley. That's what my head says, but my heart says no. So, but no, it's a stacked card. I'm really looking forward to all of it. And it should be a very good weekend of fights. And if it doesn't deliver, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I'm also that co-main event too between Price and Cerrone too. I'm looking for that. And also too, I mean, the poster that Price posted on too on Twitter, that was hilarious. Alex, where do you kind of stand on the whole thing with this upcoming weekend? Anything you're looking forward to?
Guys, like I said, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm obligated to talk about him.
Right.
Sorry, guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Darn it. Am I back?
We can hear your voice.
What's going on?
I've
got radio waves passing through my neighborhood. Hello? Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Okay, don't worry about seeing me. If you can hear my voice.
Yep.
Khamzat Chimaev. We have to talk about it. I'm of two minds of this guy. I'm like a lot of people. I love what I saw on Fight Island. Okay, super exciting. Love his personality. I want to smash. I want to fight 2 times in one night. That's great. UFC loves it. I want people to temper their expectations. He's 8-0 now, 9-0. He's facing a guy in Mearshart, very strong grappler, bigger than a guy who's I think will be bigger than him when they get in the cage. I could be wrong. And look, I think of course I'm picking Chimaev. That's fine, but I want people to temper their. The first 2 guys he beat have 0 grappling game, 0. And he did what he's supposed to do. He took care of business. Okay, I am not trying to slow down the Chimaev hype train. If you love Khamzat Chimaev, more power to you. I'm just saying, I wouldn't be surprised if he lost to Gerald Mearshart. I wouldn't be surprised if we lost to Damian Maia. Okay, and there's no shame in it. These are veterans of the sport. I'll gladly pick Chimaev for both fights, but for me, And I think a lot of people, besides the main event, maybe even some people, including the main event, given like we kind of mentioned, we wish we'd gotten this fight like 2 years ago, the Covington Woodley fight. This Chimaev fight might be the most like intriguing fight for a lot of people, just based on how much heat he had coming off Fight Island. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but that for me is definitely one to look out for, and I'm sure a lot of people as well.
No, I totally agree with that too, because I remember, I think it was on one of our shows, Lucas, we kind of talked about who were kind of the biggest winners from that whole Fight Island series, and I mean, he was easily one of the front runners, without a doubt.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So it's exciting, but like you mentioned, the expectations, right? Because people are like, "Oh, you ragdolled 2 Cage Warriors guys that can't wrestle." So now you've got 2 dudes that can wrestle. So it's going to be the interesting test to find that out.
Yeah. Hey. Credit to the UFC. Like I said, I think this matchmaking is insane, but they said they're all in, and the matchmaking certainly makes it look like they're all in. So let's see what happens Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. And Alex, before I let you go too, we do have a listener question here that I want to
do not read this out. Do not read this out. I just saw it. Do not read it. I'm not falling for this trap. I can see the questions too. I'm not falling for this trap.
Sounds good. And all right, guys. Well, Alex, thanks so much for giving the time. I really appreciate it. I know Lucas does as well.
I apologize for the connection.
It's okay.
Blame Canada. Blame Canada, as they say. I apologize for the connection.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next week with another great guest. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and take care.